Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 4. I guess the seasons don't really matter that much anymore, given that I've pretty much settled into a video format I like at this point. I mean, this is pretty much just gonna be Season 3.5 being real, but hey, we're back. Can you believe it, guys? I sure can't. We now live in a post-Granny video society. I never thought I'd see the day. What better way to celebrate than to make another Granny video? Kinda. If you watched the Granny video, which, let's be real, you probably did, you may remember the Granny fact where it brought up one of Dvloper's other games called The Twins. That fact was actually added super late into the video's production, because I completely forgot it existed while I was making most of that video. But I decided to throw it in last minute, just so no one could scream at me in the comments saying I forgot it. I asked you all if it was worth playing, and there was a lot of people in the comments that said it was a bit of an underrated gem. So, what better way to start off this year of videos than to take a good look at this game and everything it has to offer. Almost like a bonus video for the actual Granny video. Although you can definitely watch this without having seen that video first, don't worry. However, speaking of bonus videos, we have some spring cleaning to go over here before we actually get into this. For starters, yes, I know the Granny video hit 50,000 likes. You don't need to remind me. The Piggy video is coming, and that is a promise. Just don't expect it for a while. It will likely be the big finale for this year after all. Second, because the Piggy video is a guarantee thanks to the like goal, I need something else to leverage subscribers for this year. You know, we gotta get those numbers up, guys, come on. So, we're going back for round 2. If I hit 800,000 subscribers, I will put into production a true Granny bonus video going over a fuck ton of fan content, including the FGTV segment that I had to sadly cut from the actual Granny video due to time reasons. But yeah, it'll all be about fan remakes, fan content, mods, the whole lot. So, what are you waiting for? Subscribe, and let's get to 800k. With that out of the way, strap in folks, as we go over Dvloper's underrated classic, The Twins. But first, this video is sponsored by Raycon. Hey everybody, there's been some pretty good music coming out recently, right? You want to know the perfect way to listen to those songs? Raycon Everyday Earbuds. I already told you all about their amazing, no fuss, best-selling everyday earbuds, but believe it or not, there are even more features I can go over. They are just that feature-rich. For example, the amazing battery life. Other brands of wireless earbuds for a similar or maybe even higher price often have some pretty weak battery lives, which is always extremely annoying. With Raycon's everyday earbuds, I can listen to my favorite girly pop music for up to 32 hours straight, meaning I can go my entire day using them and never have to worry about the battery dying. You may be thinking to yourself right now, wow, these must be super expensive given how amazing these are. Well, you'd be wrong. Raycon everyday earbuds start at just half the price as other premium audio brands. What a steal! I've also been loving these cool protective case covers. First of all, check out this design. It complements the earbud's color perfectly, and it's so stylish. And not only do these look great, they support wireless charging, so I don't even have to take them out of the protective cover to get 90 minutes of battery in just 10 minutes of charging time. With a 30-day happiness guarantee, you really have nothing to lose trying out Raycon. Go to buyraycon.com/yeah to get up to 20% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 20% off everything on Raycon's website, including 20% off all headphones too, when you go to buyraycon.com/yeah. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. So, what the hell even is The Twins anyway? Released on November 19th, 2020 for mobile devices, The Twins is Dvloper's first and only non-Granny game since the release of the original back in 2017. Even though it isn't technically a Granny game, The Twins still shares a surprising amount of DNA with its more popular cousin. For the sake of keeping things simple, I refer to this game as a Granny spin-off in the title, but it's actually more like a Granny remix than an actual spin-off. Like, Granny characters are in the game, and a lot of the same core game design fundamentals are on display here, but there are quite a few changes made to the Granny formula that help The Twins stand on its own. It's almost like a really crazy mod of a Granny game that adds a bunch of new things while keeping the core of the gameplay intact. The further we get into this video, the more that will make sense. Before we get into all that though, there are a few things I want to go over first. In regards to the twins and its relationship to the Granny and Slendrina universe, Dvloper stated previously that it is not canon. I thought that was important to mention right away, as multiple characters from the Granny series appear in this game as optional antagonists. Their inclusion is really just a what-if scenario though, and nothing in this game matters to the greater Slendrina universe. I mean, there is literally a poster of Granny in one of the rooms in this game. Not like a photo of her, which would already be kind of odd. No, this is a poster for the Granny video game. I'm sure this was just done as a cute little Easter egg since, once again, not canon, but this heavily implies that The Twins takes place in a universe where Dvloper exists and made Granny games. So does The Twins take place in our universe? When the Granny characters are enabled in the game, is that like the shit in the movies where the video game characters come to our world? Is The Twins secretly a buddy cop movie with James Marsden and Granny going on an epic road trip? Yo, wait, that's actually kind of fire. Anyway, TLDR, The Twins takes place in its own contained universe. As much as I'd personally prefer to take place in the Slendrina universe, I totally understand the decision to separate them. Outside of the gameplay and the cameo characters, The Twins is definitely going for a slightly different vibe and aesthetic compared to Granny. I mean, I don't even think this game is supposed to be a horror game at all. It's a lot more cartoony and goofy than any of the Slendrina and Granny games are. I'll talk a little bit more about that later though. We still have one more thing to talk about quickly before we actually get into this. You may remember me saying at the start of this segment that The Twins was released on mobile devices back in 2020. So, did it ever get a PC port then? I mean, all three of the Granny games got PC ports, and The Twins is older than Granny 3. Surely Dvloper found the time to throw this game on Steam at some point. Hey, I'm a fair man. I'll give you 3 seconds to guess if he did it, okay? Alright, here we go. 1, 2, no, he didn't put it on Steam. There's no PC port. Yep, surprisingly, even though there was and still is demand for it, The Twins has been stuck on mobile since it released. Later this year, it will celebrate its 5th anniversary of not only releasing, but also being trapped on mobile. Listen, I understand the Slendrina games not having official PC ports, minus the one that actually does for some fucking I don't know, whatever. Those games are pretty damn simple and not nearly as replayable as the Granny games. Would I personally like a collection of all the Slendrina games on Steam? I mean, yeah, but what do you take me for? But I logically understand why that doesn't exist. That same logic does not apply to The Twins. Not only is it way more replayable than any of the Slendrina games by a wide margin, but it's also pretty much on par with the Granny series in terms of content. There's 4 whole difficulty options, a practice mode, and a bonus guest mode. The Twins is also just the type of game that controls way better on keyboard and mouse compared to trying to use the mobile controls. This really isn't much of a point against the game, but I mean, it is true. The Granny games are literally proof of this. Those games are leagues better on PC, just thanks to the easier movement options that a keyboard and mouse inherently provide. So, why am I talking about any of this? Like, boo-hoo, the game isn't on PC. Move on, little bro, it's not that deep. Well, you're probably wondering why the gameplay footage you've been seeing this entire time is very clearly of a PC port of the game I just spent a minute saying doesn't have a PC port. Here's where things get kind of, weird. I went into the production of this video knowing that The Twins did not have a PC port. At least, not officially. This is kind of a tangent, so stick with me here. Back during the making of the definitive Granny video, I ended up losing all of the footage I recorded for Slendrina X. I was uploading all the recordings to a Google Drive, and just so happened to notice that I somehow ended up deleting that specific footage. Thankfully, all of the Slendrina games are very short, so replaying Slendrina X for new footage really wasn't going to be an issue. However, just out of curiosity, I decided to check online to see if anyone had made a fan PC port of Slendrina X. All of my footage for the Slendrina games in the Granny video have visible overlays from the Android emulator I was using to record footage, which isn't that big of a deal, but I thought it might be nice to use some potential cleaner footage if the option was available. To my surprise, I ended up finding a fan-made collection of almost all of Dvloper's games for PC. So I downloaded the collection and booted up Slendrina X. I tried to record some footage using the PC port, but I kept running into some weird issues, and ended up just going back to the Android emulator, which is why the footage of Slendrina X in the Granny video is in line with all the other Slendrina games. Why am I telling this story? Well, when I eventually decided I was going to make this video, my first thought wasn't to go and download the twins on my emulator. No, it was to boot up the game from the PC collection I had previously downloaded. So, I recorded all of my footage using this fan PC port, and it was phenomenal. I ran into pretty much zero issues, and compared to the mobile version, which I ended up trying out on my phone later, this PC port was literally just an overall better experience. Easily the definitive way to play the twins. I was fully intending to tell you all to play this version of the game if you wanted to try it out for yourself. However, that's when I decided to dig a little deeper. When looking to see who I should give credit to for the PC port, I very quickly realized that the person who put this collection together was not the person who actually made these ports. They pretty much just compiled a bunch of fan PC ports and made a little menu for it, and that's it. While the convenience is nice, I obviously wanted to credit the actual person who made the port. That's where a whole new story began to unravel. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, the PC port of the twins I played for this video, as far as I can tell, was leaked, never to be played by the general public. I don't want to get too deep into this, since it isn't actually super relevant to the actual point of this video, but I think I'd be doing everyone a massive disservice by just ignoring this completely. So here's a quick TLDR. Prominent Granny community member, modder, and developer, Buttery Stancakes, made a completely from the ground up recreation of the twins for PC. They would go on to upload multiple videos of them playing the port, but made sure to state in the description that they had no intention of ever actually releasing it. This makes total sense, since by playing this version of the game, you aren't playing Dvloper's version of the game, which supports him with the ads. Okay, so if the port was only meant to be watched and not played, how the hell did I play through the entire thing without even knowing that? So as far as I can tell, this port was slowly but surely spread around to friends of Buttery to be played in private or for YouTube content. Somewhere along the line, one of the people that had this port ended up going rogue and leaking it publicly, which is how I ended up downloading it without knowing any of the lore behind it. As far as I can tell, no statement was ever made about it leaking, but there's a good chance one was made in like a Discord or something where I wouldn't be able to see it. So here's my stance on all of this. I cannot, in good faith, tell you to play this version of the game. Who even knows what people are putting in the re-uploads of it these days? Better safe than sorry. Not only that, but we all love and support Dvloper around here. So until an actual PC port is made, which may never happen, I recommend just setting up an Android emulator and playing it that way. You'll get a pretty similar experience to the PC port, just thanks to the ability to use a keyboard and mouse. While you're at it, make sure to check out Buttery Stancakes and all their Granny content. They make some pretty cool shit, and it's the least I can do since I'm literally using their port of the game. Hopefully one day Dvloper will put the twins on Steam themselves, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, with all of that finally out of the way, it's time to actually get into this. I did not expect to spend so long on that, but hey man, this is the Yeah channel. You should probably be used to this by now. Anyway, this is Granny's weird spin-off, kinda, The Twins. One of the benefits of the twins not being part of the Slendrina universe is that there really isn't any homework you need to do in order to fully understand what's going on in this game. Sure, you can play the Granny games just fine without knowing anything about Slendrina, but you're absolutely missing out on part of the overall experience by not being familiar with that aspect of the world. The twins really gets a clean slate to tell its own story, and I think it actually does a very good job with that. Unlike Granny, where you kind of just have to guess what the hell is going on in the story in the beginning, the twins straight up tells you its entire backstory as soon as you boot up the game, which is definitely a nice change of pace. You play as a high-level criminal who has finally been caught by the police after years of stealing important, valuable items. Instead of just getting locked up, however, the judges decided to offer you a deal that, if successfully followed through on, would let you avoid jail time completely. You see, you aren't the only high-level thief around these parts. The infamous twin brothers, Bob and Buck, have also gained quite the reputation over the years for also stealing valuable items. I guess whatever items they stole are way more valuable than whatever you stole, which kind of makes sense considering one of them is the fucking Mona Lisa. I'm not joking, it's just straight up the fucking Mona Lisa. Anyway, the police want those items back bad. Your mission is to sneak into an abandoned prison that the police have figured out Bob and Buck are hiding out in and steal back the 3 most valuable items the twins have stolen. You're probably wondering why the fucking police don't just go and raid the prison themselves, given that would probably be a significantly easier way of doing this. Good question. This entire exposition dump is provided to us in the form of an in-universe contract that the protagonist has to agree to. Agree to the terms, and you're thrown right into the main menu. Decline the offer, and a set of jail cell bars come crashing down over the screen and force close the game. Such a small detail, but shit like this really gives so much more personality to a game like this. I fucking love it. In regard to the actual story here, I love this setup. Setting the player up as an infamous thief is so perfect for the style of gameplay this game has. As I kind of mentioned earlier, the twins pretty much plays identically to Granny, with the addition of a bunch of remixed mechanics. What do you do in Granny games? Sneak around a house while collecting items and try to find a way to escape. Does that setup not sound literally perfect for a game where you play as a robber trying to steal a bunch of items from an abandoned prison? It's such a genius setup that fits right over the existing gameplay the twins is taking from, while still feeling completely different from the premise of Granny. Really good shit here. Probably one of my favorite aspects of this game. That's pretty much it when it comes to story though. Obviously there's some more stuff to say regarding the titular twins themselves, in terms of their personalities and such, but I think that talking point is better saved for when I get to how they actually function during gameplay. So, why waste any more time? Let's actually talk about that gameplay. As I went over a little bit earlier, the twins pretty much boils down to a crazy mod of a Granny game that adds a bunch of new core gameplay mechanics that are completely absent in that original title. The core of the game is pretty much the exact same though, so let's quickly go over what stayed the same. The twins keeps all the basic movement from Granny intact. You can walk to get around the abandoned prison, and crawl to get into smaller spaces that usually lead to shortcuts or hiding spots. The hiding spots you don't have to crawl into are also carried over from Granny, although they are overall much less useful here. We'll go over it a little bit more when I get into the map, but the twins is designed in such a way where you can very easily go an entire round without using a locker or something similar a single time. The map is very good when it comes to traversal, so hiding is less of a necessity. The main objective may be different from Granny, but the steps to get there are pretty much the exact same. The twin still has you wandering around a big map, looking for items that you can then use in a variety of ways. While those items are used to complete the escape endings in Granny, in the twins, they're used to collect the items required to steal back the 3 main items you've been tasked with nabbing. These main items glow bright green, which looks kinda funny, however, it does make sure you know exactly where they are when you first play the game. Just like Granny, a majority of these items work off various presets for their spawn locations, keeping the route you need to take in order to complete the game fresh every time. Well, maybe not every time if you actually end up remembering one of the presets, but I mean, most normal people aren't going to be doing that, so the illusion of the item spawning in random places is still, for the most part, kept intact. Some items don't change locations, however, such as the important green glowing items needed to complete the game. While I think it would have been fun if they could move around a little bit between presets, I get why they're kept in place. It'd be like if the front door in Granny 1 randomly changed locations every time. It might be neat for a little bit, but would probably get annoying after a while. So far, these are some pretty standard gameplay mechanics that both the twins and Granny share. But this next one definitely cements the former as a spin-off of some kind without a doubt in my mind. One of the main aspects of the Granny trilogy is the ability for Granny to hear your every movement so she can find you easier. This mechanic is one of the best parts of those games, and forces you to be alert and keep moving at almost all times. Well, that exact same mechanic is given to both of the titular twins, Bob and Buck. In fact, both of these antagonists are essentially just copy-paste of Granny with some very slight tweaks. They both aggro on you if you enter their line of sight, they can both catch you if you run into them directly, they can both be knocked out by weapons or other means, and like we've already established, they can both hear any noises you make. If you recall from the definitive Granny video, I mentioned that Grandpa's inclusion in Granny Chapter 2 was done exceptionally well because he had completely different mechanics from Granny. If you had two almost identical characters going after you at all times, especially in regards to the whole being able to hear everything thing, that would probably just get boring after a while. Well, that exact scenario is pretty much this game. So, how do I feel about it? Well, just like I initially thought, having the twins structured almost the exact same way does definitely hurt the game in certain situations. However, there is actually a lot of good that came out of Dvloper designing them this way that I didn't even really consider before playing this game. This structure is definitely way more of a mixed bag than I thought it would be. So let's talk about it. I previously mentioned that Bob and Buck do have some slight differences, so I should probably quickly go over those. I'm not 100% sure about these, since once again, these two pretty much act the exact same way, but here's what I think makes them different. As far as I can tell, Bob's base walking speed is faster than Buck's. However, when they both hear a noise and beeline towards the location of it, Buck becomes faster than Bob and is quicker to check out the source of the sound. On top of that, one of my favorite mechanics from Granny Chapter 2 returns here, as both Bob and Buck have unique actions they can do in specific rooms that will trigger specific noises to play. Bob will occasionally go and drink his coffee in the kitchen, and Buck will occasionally go and sit in the toilet and say a specific voice line. I never actually physically saw that one happen, but apparently it's a thing. Sure, why not? Other than those very small things though, both of these guys are pretty much identical. Like I've already alluded to, there are some very glaring cons with designing the antagonist like this. Not only is it pretty boring and repetitive, but sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're dealing with two characters at the same time. In Granny Chapter 2, being able to bait Granny over to specific places was as strong as it was in the first game, but the additional challenge of not being able to bait Grandpa anywhere with the regular noises added a whole other level of thrill and skill to that game. Even if you knew where one of them was, you could usually never truly be sure where the other was. This was then perfectly balanced out by the various character sound cues and Grandpa's ability to use the security cameras. So even if it was harder, it never truly felt that unfair. Because the twins function the exact same way, you can very easily bait them over to certain areas and immediately dip out, knowing that both of them are far away from you. However, even though I personally do wish that one of the twins had completely different gameplay mechanics, there is some good to come out of them being handled this way. For starters, the basic premise of having two threats wandering around the prison at all times is fundamentally just a good setup. Sure, once you get into the swing of things and start baiting them around everywhere, that challenge definitely dies down a lot, but when you're not doing that and just moving from place to collect items faster, it's pretty tense knowing that you have double the chance to run into a threat. Obviously, this is a thing in Granny Chapter 2 as well, but it works just as well here as it does there. Secondly, and this is definitely the more interesting of the two, because of the way the map is designed, you can pretty easily be put into scenarios where you need to think extra hard about how to go about baiting the twins. The best example of this has to do with the room at the bottom of the prison that features multiple different blueprints and one of the 3 items you need to steal back from the twins. The standard entrance to this room is blocked off by a laser tripwire that will explode if you walk into it. So the only way to enter this room at the start of a run is to find the shortcut in the outside section that lets you drop down into the middle of this room. Now that you're in this room though, you have to think about how to get out of it unharmed. Because the laser tripwire is still something you need to deal with, you have to decide the best way to go about setting it off without hurting yourself. There are 2 ways to do this. You can either open up one of the lockers to block the blast of the laser, which will then set it off safely when you nudge towards it, or you can make noise and have the twins set it off themselves, which will actually knock them out in the process. And if you're wondering, yes, this knockout mechanic is the exact same one from the Granny games, just carried over. However, there are risks with both of these methods. If you set it off yourself, the noise will make both of the twins immediately beeline towards the area. Thankfully, you can hide in said lockers used to trigger the laser, but then you have to be extra careful and wait for both of them to walk away before you leave the area. The way out of this room is very closed off, without a lot of easy paths to slip away to. So it's definitely a risk getting both of the twins down there in any capacity. Here's where things get a little more interesting though. If you make noise and trigger the twins to trip the laser themselves, you never actually know for sure if both of them will get knocked out by the laser. Depending on how far each of them was from the room when the noise was made, there is absolutely a chance that only one of them sets off the tripwire and you still have to deal with the other one. Or you could get lucky and both of them could be close enough to the explosion that they both get knocked out. It's all really a gamble. This is what makes them working practically the same, with very subtle differences, actually cool. Because you never really know how long it will take for either of them to reach your location at any given moment, which definitely helps keep things interesting. Overall, yeah, I do wish that the two of them were far more different from each other. However, I still had a ton of fun with this game, and this aspect of it doesn't really hinder my enjoyment that much. Just something I would want addressed in a sequel or something, even though that probably will never happen. Alright. Now that we've actually gone over the core gameplay and what things from the Granny series were carried over, which was a lot, how about we talk about those remixed mechanics I mentioned earlier? The things that are completely different from Granny that really help the twins stand apart. Starting off with something that you've probably been staring at pretty much this entire time. This game actually has an inventory system. Unlike Granny, which is heavily designed around the fact that you can only carry one item at a time, the twins takes a completely different approach and lets you carry around 3 items at the same time. This might seem like an odd change at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense given the structure of this game. In Granny, the gameplay really focuses around bringing a set of items to one specific spot, the escapes. While there are a ton of items in the game, you only ever need to use the ones that will help you further the specific ending you're trying to go for. The twins also has multiple escape routes, however they are not the focus of the game at all. The 3 different exits in the twins only require 2 items each, and are very easy to open up. So while you can choose the way you want to leave just like in Granny, it is not the main focus of the gameplay. As mentioned earlier, the twins is all about retrieving 3 stolen items that Bob and Buck have hidden around the abandoned prison. Each of these objects are actually a lot more comparable to how the endings in Granny work, where you need to collect multiple items and do some small puzzles in order to collect the objects. The big change here is that instead of just needing to do one of the escape routes in Granny, you need to collect all 3 of the objects to complete this game. Meaning, you actually have to do a lot more stuff on the whole compared to the typical Granny ending. This is where the 3-slot inventory system comes back into play. Because you have to do a little more work here, the inventory system was included in order to balance out the game back to around the same difficulty of the Granny games. I think it works really well here, and actually helps you make a lot less noise than in the Granny games, since you won't be messing around with whatever item you're holding nearly as much here. That definitely helps balance out the whole identical gameplay mechanic thing that we talked about earlier, which is nice. I think I probably prefer the single slot system from the Granny games a little bit more, but I don't think it would work nearly as well here. So I totally understand why it was changed. Another thing you may have noticed from all the footage in this video is that you can actually jump in the twins. This is mostly just used for jumping over the lower laser tripwires scattered around the prison, but the map design does occasionally make good use of its inclusion. Mostly in this basement area that you can access from the main room at the start of the game. There's a few platforms here you can jump across, and while it's not really anything crazy, I'm glad at least some of the map utilizes this addition. The main use of the jump outside of the very few places on the map that require it is actually bunny hopping around the map for extra speed. This is especially useful in the harder difficulties because you do legitimately get some pretty decent speed from it. You do have to be careful when jumping around stairs or any long drops though. So yeah, definitely be careful. Speaking of fall damage, the final thing I want to talk about here is this red bar at the top of the screen, aka your lifeline. If you remember in Granny, getting caught in those games would send you forward a day, and after 5 days, the game would end. The Twins does something actually pretty similar, but in a completely different way visually. If you get caught by either of the twins, or take any amount of fall damage, you will lose some of your health on your lifeline bar. For small amounts of fall damage, you just take a little bit of damage and keep moving. But if you take a lot of fall damage, it will trigger the same effect as if you were being caught by Bob or Buck. When that happens, you don't actually respawn in the same spot every single time like in the Granny games. The twins will actually pick one of a few set respawn locations, which is actually super cool. Sometimes you respawn in a cage and need to steal a key off of Buck in order to escape, and other times you respawn in a locked room and need to crawl out onto some small wooden shelves in order to get back into the main prison area. This is something I actually kind of wish the Granny games did. It really helps keep things fresh, even when something as annoying as dying happens. If you lose all of your lifeline, an iconic Granny style game over death animation will play, and you have to start from the very beginning. You can also make some bandages by finding tape and alcohol, which can restore some of your lifeline if you're in a pinch. Pretty much just a buffed version of the extra day mechanic from Granny 1. And that's pretty much it for the changes from Granny. When I said the Twins was Granny's weird spinoff, I really was not kidding. Some of these changes are so bizarre, but like in a good way. I really do like this game. A huge part of why I like this game is actually the map design, which, if you remember, was a point I made sure to bring up for all of the Granny games in the definitive Granny video. I believe a good map in a game like this can truly take it from just being good to great. And it always made me sad that both Granny Chapter 2 and Granny 3 don't have amazing maps, especially compared to the first games. So, you're probably wondering, where does the Twins stack up? Well, hey, wait a minute. I think I'm forgetting something here. Yeah, wait. There's a crucial part of these games that I spent a lot of time talking about in the last video. But what was it? Oh yeah! I remember now, stupid me, shooting Granny in the face with a Glock. Weapons are back in the Twins, and there was a completely new set of them this time around, which definitely helps the game feel more unique, just given how important they are. There's quite a few of these here, so allow me to very quickly go over each of them. The revolver is pretty much just this game's version of the shotgun from the first game. Just like it, you'll need to find and locate 3 different pieces of the gun in order to put it together on a table downstairs. Once built, it can actually hold 4 bullets at once, which is pretty fucking good. Ammo for it is limited, similar to the shotgun, and you have to be careful not to overuse it and run out. I really don't have that much to say other than, yes, it's very good. Probably the best weapon in the entire game, if you can manage it well, and if you can even get the thing built at all. The plasma gun is one of the craziest fucking things to be featured in any of these games, which is definitely saying a lot. Locked away in a room with a door that lacked its handles, you have to find both of them and reattach them in order to retrieve it. This weapon actually makes good use of the fact you have multiple inventory slots, since you need to pick up and carry around both a can of compressed air and the gun itself. In order to actually use the thing, you need to fill up said can with air using a dispenser featured in one of the connecting rooms. Dvloper decided to actually be evil with its placement, however, because returning from Granny, a creaky floor is placed almost right where you need to stand in order to fill up the can, which immediately puts the pressure on when you need to refill it. If you successfully fill up the can, you can attach it to the gun in order to actually use the damn thing. At a max fill, the plasma gun has 3 shots before it needs to be refilled again. And even though it's technically less shots than the revolver, the plasma gun can do some serious damage. If both Bob and Buck are next to each other and you shoot the plasma gun at them, it has the ability to knock both of them out at the same time with 1 shot. It even makes their bodies ragdoll like crazy, which is truly just the cherry on top of this weapon. You do have to be careful with it, however. It's very easy to accidentally knock yourself out with it if you shoot it and it hits something too close to your location. That mixed with its refill method makes it just a little bit worse than the revolver, but not by much. Both are very good. Sticks of dynamite can be found scattered around the map, with a couple of them spawning every single run. You can use these to quickly knock out the Twins without actually getting a proper gun. However, I rarely did this. The dynamite actually has a significantly better use than knocking out our main threats. It's actually much more useful on this fucking disgusting overgrown beetle. So yeah, this is the thing. You remember all those little pet characters from the Granny games, right? Well, the giant-ass spider from those games has nothing on this massive-ass beetle you need to take care of in order to collect one of the item spawns every run. The intended way to do this is the whole jumping, platforming thing in the basement I was talking about earlier, but you can skip all of that and just blow up the beetle with the dynamite. I seriously don't know why you would ever do this the normal way. It's not like the Twins has rage mode from Granny or anything. There is genuinely 0 punishment for killing this beetle. So yeah, huge shout out to Dynamite. As mentioned previously, laser tripwires are scattered around the prison in various places, with even more showing up on harder difficulties. Obviously, these are also obstacles for you, the player, but it's also pretty easy to bait Bob and Buck into these under certain circumstances, which is always pretty fun. Risky for sure, but fun. Finally, and this one is actually Bob exclusive, remember earlier when I mentioned he would occasionally go and drink his coffee in the kitchen? Well, you can actually find fucking rat poison and poison his coffee before he drinks it, which will knock him out randomly whenever he decides to go and take a drink. You can do it multiple times in a run as well, so it's actually pretty useful just for how easy it is to set up. Alright, that's it. That's all the weapons. A lot of really broken ones in this game, but the really good ones take a bit to actually get, so it's pretty balanced, all things considered. Let's talk about the map. I am so insanely happy to report that the Twins has a fantastic map. One that pretty easily rivals the one featured in the original Granny. Is it better? Probably not. That map is really fucking good. But it is damn close, and there's also a good chance my inherent Granny bias is stopping me from saying it's better. It's really good, guys. Let's quickly go over my biggest issues with the maps from Granny Chapter 2 and Granny 3, just so we can see what went wrong there. For Granny Chapter 2, it was really just a lack of good shortcuts. The first game's map has this really nice flow to it, where at one moment you can be at one point of the map, and then the next moment you're in a completely different area that would have taken like a minute to walk to normally. It made it so satisfying to duke Granny and get out of close calls. Easily one of the best aspects of that game. The shortcuts that are featured in Granny Chapter 2 are either just fine or almost completely useless, and the overall layout is nowhere near as fun to traverse. Granny 3's map kind of had a different issue, where there was really only one insanely good shortcut and not much else. That map also just felt really big for kind of no reason. Adding more crazy shortcuts to it would have given it a reason to be that big. Okay, with that out of the way, what does the Twins do with its map that makes it so fun to run around in? For starters, shortcuts are fucking back in full force. There are so many good ones here. It would genuinely be hard to go over every single one. The shortcut outside that drops you into the laser-blocked basement room, the crawl space behind the prison cells, the bedroom closet tunnel into the communications room, the hole in the electricity locked room that lets you sneak around on top of the shelves in the main prison lobby, where you can either safely drop down or drop into one of the prison cells. The fucking laundry chute in the kitchen, bro? Absolutely goated shortcut, dude. I started pretty much every single run of this game by going directly to the kitchen, checking all the spawns, and then when I'm done, making a fuck ton of noise and escaping using the chute. The shortcuts here are just so insanely fun to use. That mixed with the faster movement thanks to jumping really lets you zoom around this entire prison in such a fun way. Another Granny game with a map this good would be incredible. It's not just the shortcuts that make this a great map though. This is another map that feels pretty big, but unlike Granny 3, this is done to its advantage thanks to the better traversal options. Because of this, the map never feels that complicated to learn, and once you do learn it, it's so much fun to play around in. The actual room variety here is also top notch, which is something I complained about for a few of the other Granny maps. Obviously, there's an entire prison area here, but then there's the more normal living quarters areas, the beetle pit, the bedroom, just some really good shit here overall. The actual item finding gameplay in order to steal back the 3 objects is also great here as well, with a lot of fun puzzles that actually feel way less tedious on the whole. Because you need pretty much every single item spawn in every run, the Twins avoids the issues Granny has sometimes with useless items thanks to the multiple endings. This makes literally everything you do feel way more useful, and it's overall just easier to make progress here, which I think will click with some people way more than Granny's approach. That's low-key another reason I want this game on Steam so it can reach more people. This almost feels like the perfect game for someone who dislikes some of Granny's more punishing mechanics, like the single slot inventory system and the sea of useless items for your chosen escape ending. I'm sure I could go on here. There's a couple other things I could mention, but I've pretty much said everything I need to say. However, like usual around here, we aren't done quite yet. Presentation-wise, the Twins really isn't that much different from Granny in terms of how it looks visually. I mean, this is a Dvloper game after all. They all look pretty similar to some extent, so this should really be no surprise. Even though the Twins came out during the gap between Granny Chapter 2 and Granny 3, this game is very clearly using the same graphical style seen in the prior game and not the updated look seen in Granny 3. Not really a big deal, but just something I thought was worth mentioning. In terms of what the Twins does to set itself apart from Granny visually, Dvloper definitely tried to give this game a little bit more of a whimsical, cartoony vibe. It's not super obvious just by looking at it really, but there's a lot of subtle details that lead me to believe this was probably the intention. For starters, Bob and Buck themselves look very different from both the Granny and Slendrina characters that came before them. Just simply by looking at their texture work, their faces are definitely going for a little bit more of a weird, goofy look. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but it definitely helps them stand out, while also very clearly being from a Dvloper game. Even outside of visual aspects, Bob and Buck are literally just a smart one, dumb one, Pinky in the brain type dynamic, which is actually super apparent when you look at their animations during the victory screens when you escape the prison successfully. That is like a very classic type of duo in cartoons, which I think was very intentional. Even little things, like the effect that the dynamite releases when it explodes, having a bunch of cartoony smoke clouds and little stars coming out of them, just gives the twins that little bit of extra whimsy. That is very much the polar opposite of what the Granny games are going for. Overall, I think I definitely prefer the visual approach seen in Granny. I think Dvloper just works better in that kind of style, but this is definitely a really cool attempt at something similar yet very different at the same time, which is very respectable. In terms of sound design, things are pretty similar to how they are in Granny. Nothing super crazy, but nothing super outwardly bad either. It's all just fine. Bob and Buck have similar voice lines to Granny and Grandpa, voiced by the one and only Dvloper for both of them, but none of their lines really stand out to me, even after playing this game for hours. The real impressive thing here in terms of the sound is actually the music for once. The background music when you're sneaking around the prison is literally perfect, and totally fits the vibe the twins is going for. It's subtle enough to not be distracting as well, which is greatly appreciated. The chase music when you get spotted is also pretty good, a lot more bombastic than the Granny chase music, which is a fun change of pace. Hey, speaking of Granny, isn't she supposed to be in this fucking game? Oh, hey Blue yeah? You know, I kinda thought we left you in 2024, yeah. Is she in the game or not? Yeah, she's in the game. With Guests mode is an additional bonus mode that was added in the twins' only major content update. But what a damn update it was, because this is a really cool addition. With Guests mode is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's the same gameplay we're already used to, but with non-canon guest characters. These come in the form of both Granny and Grandpa. This means you have to deal with 4 threats walking around the prison at all times, which is a really neat challenge. Granny and Grandpa work the exact same way they did in Granny Chapter 2, minus game-specific mechanics like the security camera room. This means that you now have 3 different characters you have to worry about every single time you make a noise, which, yeah, that's a lot. Thankfully, this mode adds another way to knock out Bob and Buck, that being Granny's own bear traps. Granny, just like in her own series, will place down bear traps every single time you successfully hide from her. Like always, you yourself can walk into them and get caught for a little bit. However, Bob and Buck, in all of their wisdom, can also get trapped in them. They don't just get trapped for a little bit either. They get full-on fucking knocked out, which is both very funny and a decent way to help balance the sheer number of threats here. Having this many characters to worry about also makes the kind of overpowered weapons a little more reasonable. With Guest mode also adds 1 new item to the spawn pool that makes this whole challenge even easier than base game, if you can believe that. Now part of the item pool is the Slendrina mask, a funny little low poly mask of Slendrina's face that you can wear during gameplay. Not only does this make your vision completely fucked, it also tricks everyone into thinking you're Slendrina, and nobody will aggro onto you, even if you look directly at them. I kind of have mixed feelings about this item, because while yes, it is cool, I also kind of wish it was slightly more balanced instead of just making the game a complete baby mode. Like, why the hell do Bob and Buck give a shit if you have the mask on? They don't fucking know who Slendrina is. Well, unless that whole Dvloper games exist in their world thing is real, which would make this entire thing really, really weird, so let's ignore that for now. But yeah, I kinda just wish the mask was only useful on Granny and Grandpa and not Bob and Buck. It would make this mode more of an actual challenge and give the player an actual reason to remove the mask more often. Oh, wait, hold on. This just in, I'm now just learning that Granny emits little hearts when you look at her with the Slendrina mask, so I take everything back, no notes, it's perfect. And with that, we are officially done here. The Twins is a very fun game, and it deserves way more attention than it ended up getting back when it came out. Hopefully at least some of you will be inspired to play the game for yourself after this. That's really all I can ask. Do not play this shit on a phone though. If you have a computer, Android emulation is the way to go. Tune in next time for a video that isn't about Granny. I know, shocking. I'm sure I'll be back to talking about this series at some point this year, but for now, it's time to move on. Well, with that, I guess there's only one thing left to say. I've been yeah, and I'll see you all next time.